Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Again, find out more about us at virginiainstitute.org first and foremost, but you can also go to our YouTube channel and find previous episodes of this program. Just go to youtube.com and then search Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Our next guest is the author of Punting Poverty, Breaking the Chains of Welfare, Damon Dunn, fellow in business and economics for the Pacific Research Institute. Damon, thank you for taking some time out with us on this Independence Day weekend, and I hope you're having a great time. And how are you doing? Everyone in your world okay?
Everyone in my world is okay. It's an interesting time. I'm sure we all will mark on our calendar the days that we face COVID-19. But I'm excited to be with you this morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm marking the 2020 down as the year we can see a lot of things more clearly despite all the rhetoric and the jumping up and down. And one of those things is, like France in the 18th century, you know, much of the cannon fodder that has been used to create these riot scenes are young men and women who walk out of their house every morning thinking, gosh, when that new convenience store opens, maybe they pay better. And the poverty that has been ginned up over 55 years since our war on poverty, and the statistics are stunning. There's 4 times as many people qualify as poor in this country as there were in 1965. If we had an actual war that, you know, was going so badly, I don't think we'd still be doing it 55 years later. Damon, tell me what started you down the track towards turning this book out, Punting Poverty, and what you found as you started to research it.
You know, the first point of intellectual curiosity was I looked at my family, and I grew up in a trailer living with 10 people on a farm, and we were on every welfare program from free and reduced lunch. We had Medicaid, housing subsidies, we had food stamps, government cheese, and my grandmother stopped working. I'll never forget it, because my mom had me at 16. She left me with my grandparents. My father was killed when I was 3. So I grew up with my grandparents and 7 children, or all uncles for me. And my grandmother stopped working one year because she made too much money for us to qualify for all the benefits that we were receiving. And so she was just cleaning homes. But that extra $400 or $500 a week that she was making was too much household income, so she stopped working. And when I thought back on that, my grandmother passed a couple of years ago, and that's really what got me thinking. I went back and looked at my neighborhood. All the same families that were poor are still there, and they're still poor. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but my uncles, all of them, 100% of my uncles are still living down there in poverty and on the same exact programs. And so I started researching this and looking into it, and what I found is that, you know, the war on poverty never moved anyone out of poverty. There was never socioeconomic mobility. What happened is that we created a systemic, institutionalized class of poverty where people who are stuck in there, if they try to reach to get out, then they get banged on the head, and they don't have any ambition to try to get out, because if you make $1 too much, mm-hmm. you're going to lose tens of thousands of dollars of benefits. And Joe, what I call it the new slavery. They've removed the shackles from the wrists and from the ankles, and now they're shackling people in poverty with public policy. You can't get out. Think about this. My mother was a single mom. There were times where she had to decide if she was going to get married or not, because the overall household income would be too much to qualify for some of the programs that we had. So it's keeping families apart. It's keeping people poor without any ambition to want to get out, because $1 more disqualifies you for tens of thousands of dollars of benefits, and it's a permanent systemic, institutionalized slave class of people that are in poverty, and they're passing it down generation to generation to generation.
I've chastened conservative thinkers in my world about this, because for decades I've been doing this, and I have wonderful dear friends. As a matter of fact, I am the minority on my street in Charlottesville, and they are, everyone I know are amazing people with amazing gifts and talents. And I said, where are the conservatives coming into the community saying, you know, what has this done for you? How has this helped you? Let's come up with a better solution. And finally, I'm starting to see some things like like, community colleges and training programs and things that if we had done this in 1965, it might have been a paradigm shift. Maybe, it's always fanciful to think, what if you could go back in time and do some of these things rather than just create government programs? But what you chronicle is exactly that all or nothing. Either you're going to get government subsidy or you get nothing. Is right. Such an obvious bureaucratic approach to it. So, what do you tell people are better solutions? How are these programs that are starting to do more towards breaking generational poverty? I work a lot with Habitat for Humanity on trying to break generational poverty and home ownership and property ownership, because I worry as I listen to some of the rhetoric of these protesters that private property ownership is in the crosshairs, and that's the best way out of poverty, is to start having your own property and building your own wealth. Whether or not it should have happened 150 years ago or not, we've got to start now, and we can't worry about what happened 150 years ago.
Yeah, first of all, you're right. For anyone listening, building wealth starts with owning a home. Even if you make $60,000, $70,000 a year as a household or more, you have an opportunity to buy a home, have it appreciate, and it's an opportunity for you to get a significant check at the end of 8, 9, 10 years. My wife's sister bought a home for $229,000 in Puyallup, Washington, 5 years ago, sold it last week for $448,000. She never had access to getting a $200,000 check like that outside of building a home, because the job she has, she pays for her bills, moving forward. Mm-hmm. Let's get to solutions. I want to address this. You look at any other country, look at the continent of Africa, any country there. You could take all of our economic ideas, but they're not going to have the same GDP or productivity because they don't have a skilled workforce. Even in Mexico, if you try to go down south and build homes or build high rises, you're going to find out that they don't have a lot of skilled labor. And so really skilled labor is the key to building wealth, and it's the key to getting out of poverty. I did it. I went to college, went to Stanford, and got a skill set. Now I do investments, and I've done real estate development. And so how do we get there? Think about this, Joe. In the early 1900s, people were only going to 8th grade because we had such an agricultural, economy. In the early 1900s, there was a high school movement because we were moving into this great industrialization, and people needed more skill sets and more education. And we had that movement. Where we are today, we need another movement because we're graduating on average 3.6 million high school seniors every year, and they're no more qualified than a kid that dropped out of high school. You can go get a minimum wage job, and that's all you can get, which is the exact same as someone who's dropped out. What we need to make a K-14, and we need to evolve to where community college is a part of our high school graduation. And that will allow students to, quote unquote, graduate with either an associate's degree, so they're 2 years up on their college degree, which reduce some of the college debt as they would only need 2 more years to finish a bachelor's, or you finish with one of the 30-plus vocation programs or license programs that we have in our community colleges, from radiology technicians and carpenters and different trades. And so there's opportunities to leave with a real skill set, and that skill set is what gives you a passport to go out into the marketplace and to gain a job that's not minimum wage, and then you can start building wealth. But it all comes down to a skill set. If you're a basketball player like LeBron James, he's got a skill set that he markets. If you're a rapper like Eminem, he's got a skill set that he markets. If you're an attorney, if you're a radio disc jockey, if you are a teacher, you have skill sets that give you a passport to go into the workplace and to get a job that allows you to start getting out of poverty. That's the only way out, developing a skill set. And the first place to start is moving to K-14 grade school system.
Let me ask you this, Damon, and we're visiting with Damon Dunn. He's got a new book out. It's called Punting Poverty and Breaking the Chains of Welfare. And, what you say means so much to me, because I remember, and I don't think I'm this old until I look in the mirror and I realize that it was a hell of a long time ago. But when I was going through high school and even junior high school, where I grew up, in middle school, there were all sorts of opportunities to try things out: carpentry, plumbing, electrician, and different programs that were not necessarily reading, writing, and arithmetic, so that you could figure out, what am I good at? What do I love to do? What turns me on? What makes me jump out of bed in the morning? And I feel like that's where we're failing our young people, is we're not really encouraging them to find that thing that they're gifted to do, and then saying, hey, let's get on it, and you'll never work a day of your life, is the old expression. I think that's Tony Robbins, but I don't want to mix my authors. But Damon, is there some of that has to go into that K-14 model too?
Yeah, and that's why I say that, because you've got 30 different vocations at the community college. What happened in high school, the reason the trades are gone, is that the unions, the labor unions, over-negotiated. They're in a position now where all the money that's going into the education system is really going to salaries and unions, wages and benefits, and you have very few dollars for programs. Most schools are taxed and can't afford a lot of after-school programs. They can't afford the vocation programs, because those dollars got siphoned into the administration and the teachers, because of the unions over-negotiated their positions, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You need to have these vocation, license, certificate programs that allow someone to and listen, everyone's not going to college, and that's okay. Like, we don't have to be disappointed in that. The kid that doesn't go to college, hey, you don't have to go get a bachelor's, but you can still go become a radiology technician and make $55,000 a year
with no debt,
live in a community and be able to buy a home.
Exactly. So let me ask you this, Damon, and on that subject, what about school choice and the portability? I mean, our flagship city, Charlottesville, spends almost $14,000 per year per student. And I look at the teachers who are struggling to make $40,000 a year, and they can't even afford a house in the city where they're teaching school, which I think is an issue of another level. But you're looking at 20 or 30 kids, each funded at $14,000 a year. There's a lot of money pouring into the classroom and not a lot coming back out of it. And I feel like giving parents the portability to say, maybe not dollar for dollar, but 75% of that money to take it as a voucher and go find a school that might meet your kid's needs a little bit more, could go a long way toward. What about school choice in your plan, Damon?
Yeah, that would absolutely improve schools, because what happens in the creative economy, right? Creative destruction. What happens is, if you're not providing, and I'm talking about having choice, if you're not providing good service, no kids are going to want to go to your school. And so you're either going to improve or your school is going to have to close. And that's how the normal marketplace is. If you want to go to a grocery store, or if you want to go to a retail shop, if you want to go to a restaurant, those that do well with good service and meets the needs of the people, they stay open. And then those that don't, they close. And so school choice is important, because it would create that creative destruction. Those who are not performing would be closed, and no dollars would go towards their schools. The second thing that's important there about that, Joe, is that, I have resources now. I've been able to build some wealth, and my daughter goes to private school. So people who have money, we've got choice. We can move. We can put our kids in private school. Right. We've got options. But if you're someone living in a low-income neighborhood, if you're a working-class, middle-class American, and your kid is going to a school that's not performing, you don't have choice right now. You're forced, and you're stuck in a school that's not teaching math right, that's not graduating kids, that aren't seeing kids move on to college. And so choice is critically important, so that those students can go to a school that's viable, and then also force the bad schools to close and or have those schools improve. Choice would do that, and that's the same thing you see in the marketplace for any business. If you don't provide good service, you're out, and if you provide good service and at the right price, you're in.
Damon, we work a lot with public policy, and we've written some of the constitutional amendments that are currently in force here in Virginia. We work a lot with elected officials, and it always puzzles me. You go into, whether it's Richmond, Roanoke, parts of Northern Virginia, even, especially you get into areas, where there had been manufacturing in Danville, in Martinsville, and you look at the closed factories, and in some cases they get, quote, redeveloped, and now they're taco restaurants and shoe stores, and we're saying, well, that's not the same as replacing a good manufacturing job that, you may have to take a shower after work instead of before it, but you're making a living that paid for your home. Now you're working at a minimum wage taco shop. It's not replacing job for job. What about the regulatory structure that needs to be in place to really redevelop these manufacturing centers, either bringing some manufacturing back so these factories can come to life again, or creating the nexus? You're in real estate, you do development. What needs to happen to open that up so we're not just waiting for the government to come buy a plot of land, an old warehouse, condemn it, and then build a baseball stadium on it?
Exactly. So three things I want to address and hit all of your points. First, I would say is that you're right. They're downgrading on the zoning, and they're taking something from a manufacturing down to a retail. And that is really your local cities, how they're planning their city. And I thought that LA's done a good job of taking downtown, which is blighted and not any residential down there, to turn office buildings into residential zonings, and that really has allowed them to upzone, and they've really started to fill in a lot of residential downtown, particularly near Staples Center. And so I think upzoning is something that they need to think about as opposed to downzoning, because upzoning brings in a lot of positive revenue and affordable housing, both affordable and regular. The second thing that I would say is that we need to decentralize, some of our government facilities. Department of Health doesn't have to be in Washington, D.C. Commerce could be in Chicago. Department of Health could be in upstate New York. You could take the agriculture department and put it somewhere in the Midwest. The energy department, put it somewhere in the Southwest. Taking these government entities and putting them into these communities, and then building what I would consider these the hubs. Like, for example, you have Silicon Valley, where you have the research institutions from Cal and Stanford, and then you have all the subsidiary technology companies, and they all kind of work together. You have all the angel financing, venture capital. So we have these epicenters that act as kind of ecosystems, and we have that in the banking system in Boston and the Triangle down in Raleigh-Durham. We have that, so we can create more of that. The third thing, I think, which is critically important, and I think the president, Trump, he's actually trying to address, or is addressing, all trade is not good trade. If we're trading, jobs, to be able to buy cheaper televisions, right? We'd much rather build the televisions here than to trade it and let it go to China, and they charge people $3 an hour or pay people $3 an hour and have no regulatory policy, and then we just get cheaper televisions out of it, and our economy is 70% consumption on our GDP. That's a problem. So we need to start looking at trade. Fair trade is balanced trade. Fair trade increases our exports. Increasing our exports means that we are manufacturers. We're building things. We're making things. And unfortunately, NAFTA and a lot of our trade deals that we've created all have trade imbalances, and now we're buyers and we're importers, and that's what really has hurt the future for the U.S. But you're 100% right. We need manufacturing jobs. We need to be creative with how we create them, and we need to make sure we're not down zoning but up zoning to create more value.
Last one for you, Damon Dunn. He is the author of Punting Poverty, Breaking the Chains of Welfare. There's a cultural, and I'm told that I don't understand, and it's part of my white privilege that I was excoriated on CBS television for it once. So I feel like I've earned my scars. But I don't understand the culture in the black community where a kid is told that if you go to high school and you go to college and you do the things that you're talking about, insert rude name, whatever the kid, Uncle Tom, sellout, wannabe, those sorts of derogatory terms where the neighborhoods almost defeat the purpose of a kid wanting to achieve anything because he's told that don't go along with the white patriarchy and create this almost second society running parallel. Is that real? Is it just something I'm being told because it sounds good? And if it is real, what do we do?
Well, first of all, this is not going to be a satisfactory answer because I'm going to answer it two ways. You think I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm not. What you're talking about is real. I was in AP classes growing up in middle school and high school, and I was called an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside, or I talk like the white people. because I actually, was trying to learn and to try to improve myself. So that is real. There is that ridicule. There is some negativity. And I don't know if it's born out of jealousy. I don't know if it's born out of, young people just, finding a way to, to just ridicule you. I don't know what it's born out of, but there is that element, and there is some impact to people who try to reach, and there may be people who don't reach as far because that pressure and that negativity keeps them from reaching. So that's not always great. But I'll tell you this: like when I got to high school, and this was cool. Like I became an all-state football player, and I was really good in track, and I played in the state of Texas, so football was big. There were times, man, we were really poor. My mom was a teacher, and then she started working nighttime at concession stands for like the Dallas Mavericks and the hockey team there, and the Cowboys. She was only making $4 an hour back then. That was minimum wage. Mm-hmm. She was doing all she could, and I had friends that were drug dealers. Guys would be like, "Hey, man, that's done. Let's buy him shoes." So, because that kid's getting out of here. So there were people who kind of looked out for me, who bought me tennis shoes, who were not good, good characters in the community. But they looked after me because they're like, this kid's going somewhere. He's got a shot to get out.
And his mom's really
the minority, but I had that experience as well.
Well, I think it is, important that we look out for each other and that we understand that achievement is not racial. It is
right.
Internal. And I appreciate the book. Is the best place to get it at pacificresearch.org, Damon, or your own website? Where should the listener go to get it?
You can go to pacificresearch.org, PRI. Or you can get it on Amazon. Amazon's easy to find it. Or you can go to Damon Done, DamonDunn.com. I wrote the book so that people can understand where the liberals and progressives are trying to take us toward this social, what I would call democratic socialism is what they want, the enlargement of the welfare state. Those of us that are free markets, those of us that are conservatives, we need to read this book, and then we need to resist. So please buy the book, and please start resisting these people trying to take this country down the wrong path.
Yeah, there are people that deserve resistance, and you've helped us identify them again. Damon, thank you so much for coming back on the program. It's always an honor to have you here, and keep doing what you do. Don't get corrupted like Burgess Owens and become a politician. I'm kidding. I'm teasing Burgess, but I really appreciate what you do because, it really, otherwise we're just going to wash, rinse, and repeat these riots, seemingly every 10 or 15 years.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us here on Freedom and Prosperity Radio on this Independence Day weekend. God bless America. What did Winston Churchill say? It's the worst form of government on the planet except for all the others. And it's the only one that takes into account that you are the owner of the country, not them. And if there's ever an underlying current of this program, that's it. Until next week, for all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, I'm Joe Thomas. So long, and thanks for all the fish. And thanks for all the fish. And thanks for all the fish.